Hello everyone and welcome to Bell-Irving Hatchery in beautiful Maple Ridge, BC. We're in the Kanaka Creek watershed, and today we're going to take you into the incubation room, see how everything operates inside the hatchery, and talk a little bit about what we do here and the salmon enhancement program. Okay, welcome inside the incubation room at Bell-Irving Hatchery. We are going to start where we start with our chum eggs every year, and show you the upwelling incubators here on the wall. These ones are a little bit different than you'll see in most hatcheries. Some do use this system. It's upwelling, so the water's coming out of the bottom back into a catch basin underneath, allowing for the recirculation system to operate. All our fresh water is coming out of the top of the header, and our sterilized water. So these incubators generally will hold upwards of about 15,000 and 25 to 27,000 eggs. If we have an abundance of coho eggs we're going to be utilizing in any given year, we could probably get a few more because they're a little bit smaller. The eggs will stay in these incubators until they reach the eyed stage of development. At that point, we'll remove them from the incubators, do something we call shocking, where they're dropped down into a large bucket with a few inches of water in it. While we do that, we're cleaning the eggs up, removing any eggs that didn't get fertilized properly or didn't survive through that stage of development. So when we're talking about shocking the eggs, we're not actually electrocuting the eggs. What we're doing is at the eyed stage of development, which you can see right here, these little guys are ready to be cleaned up a little bit and getting ready to be transferred over to the other incubators. During that process, we remove the eggs from the containers. They fall into a bucket, generally using a siphon hose for these guys. They'll drop into a bucket with a little bit of water in the bottom. That causes a little bit of force and impact with the eggs, stirs them up a little bit. And because of that, some of the weaker eggs that haven't developed properly or perhaps won't make it through the whole cycle will die off in the next few days, and we can go into the next stage of incubation and clean them up and remove them and make sure they don't impact the health of the other eggs during the remaining cycle before emergence. So once we've completed our shocking process and all the eggs have been enumerated again, we figure out how many we have. We'll put the appropriate number of eggs into each tray in our tea stacks. So each one of these trays will generally hold around 5,000 eggs, we'll say. That can differ obviously with the size of the eggs and the species used. This little screen comes off the top of a basket which sits down inside the tray. And you're wondering now there's no water in here. That's because this side of our incubation system is shut down now because all our chum have emerged and are out swimming outside now. So we'll push that in and you can kind of get an idea. We have 7 trays that actually contain eggs, and our upper tray will have a filter in it, and that just helps us keep the water a little bit cleaner for the eggs underneath. And as I stated, the eggs will stay in here through the hatching process, which again is a time where we want to come in regularly, maintaining the baskets, the screens, making sure we get rid of some of the shells and remove dirty water out of the bottom of the tray. Most important thing through the entire process is keeping our eggs and alevins as healthy as possible. So when we're in this, at that stage that we're hatching now, you can see the alevins with the small yolk sac attached to their bellies. They're going to feed off of that yolk for, depending on water temperatures, but a good couple months anyways before everybody's ready to swim. And when the yolks almost disappeared, their little bellies are going to start to close up. And our kind of official, non-official term for that is buttoned up. And at that time, you're actually, with some of these guys, you can see there's actually a little slit we can see that's remaining in their bellies. But that's a pretty good indicator that these guys are ready to start swimming. And so we'll take some out and do a little test and see how everybody does. And if everybody comes up swimming, then they'll go out to the capilano troughs. And from there, we begin to rear. So each year, people always wonder as well, how is it decided how many eggs you guys are going to collect each year, fertilize? And where do the fish go? Within our fish production plan, we also have some other things that get decided every year. And one thing that's really cool is how many eggs are going to be distributed from Bell-Irving to Vancouver schools, Burnaby schools, all the way out, sometimes as far east as Desroches, just east of Mission. And so we have a specific incubator for that. And we're going to show you that in a second. The other thing I wanted to show you was the little chart we have behind us here. This is just a small example of some of the other scientific data and things that are collected that we attempt to understand more and more and more about these fish every year. And I'm sure you could talk to just about any biologist, anybody involved with Pacific salmon. They don't have to be a biologist, it can be just about anyone. People have been working 30, 40 years of their lives with these fish, and they're still discovering new things every day, every week. And we know they're incredible, but the more we learn about them, the even more incredible they become. And so this is just telling us a little bit about the energy that the chum salmon use to return into Kanaka Creek, but it also talks a little bit about what they leave behind. And that's a super, super important aspect of the species and their life cycle, because it's what they leave behind, often more than just the eggs and their young. They're leaving themselves behind, and in turn just enormous loads of biomass that return into our local tributaries and large streams, rivers every year. Small tributaries like Kanaka Creek, which would be Dunlop and Thornvale Creek. A lot of people wouldn't even think we would have salmon in those streams because they're so tiny. Last year, in fact, not only did the coho come back into both those systems, but we had an abundance of chum utilize those streams as well. And so then you would ask, well, why is that so important? Because those chum and those big bodies, that biomass coming back, even if we have in small Thornvale Creek, even if we have 60 chum chuck into that system, the nutrients that they're leaving behind and providing that system for the following year and many years to come, they're actually helping feed their young in the springtime. And not only that, they're feeding the riparian areas. The vegetation is going to grow maybe a little bit more abundant. The insect life, the invertebrate life in the streams, everything. Everything flourishes when these salmon come home. So that's just a very small aspect of an enormous amount of time and science that goes into understanding these fish just a little bit better, and learning more about what we can do to keep them healthy and keep them coming back to the streams. One of the super rewarding aspects of what we do with our small incubator here is produce eggs every year for some honors in the classroom program. And it gives kids the opportunity to not only be connected to these amazing fish, they're actually receiving 55 eyed chum eggs in January every year, and they put them down in some rocks in an aquarium like a natural red. The kids help monitor, maintain the eggs through the cycle. In the springtime when the fish emerge, kids are generally come back from spring break and ready to feed their fish for a week or two and prepare to release them to their local stream or come back to Kanaka Creek. Each January, when our eggs get distributed, not only will they go to schools in School District 42 in Maple Ridge, which includes Casey First Nations in Lower Pitt Meadows, they'll also go as far as Vancouver to the west and Mission to the east, and encompassing sometimes as many as 3,000 to 4,000 students will benefit from what happens in this little room and this little incubator. And obviously a lot of hours put in by our volunteers, not just myself, so it's incredibly rewarding. So what we're looking at now is the main intake, main water supply for the hatchery. As you can see, we've got a large head wall in place that helps guide, back up some of the water and guide that into our intake box. This gets transferred then down a about 25-foot line that enters a 3-chambered sump, and from there we distribute our water either to the hatchery building through a reservoir, or we distribute it straight to the earthen ponds. There's a lot of challenges, obviously, with an intake system. The big thing of which is large storm events, which brings a lot of sediment downstreams, potentially can block screens or block the lines going in. These things have happened over the years. But the most important thing is that we have that consistent water supply coming into the hatchery. We do not have the benefit of groundwater supply at this facility, so all the water we receive goes into the system as surface water from Kanaka Creek. So we're just outside the incubation room outside the hatchery building right now, where our capilano troughs are. As you can see, full of fish right now. Approximately 280,000 salmon are swimming on site, and each year, about 200 to 210,000 of these fish will leave here for other watersheds and for enhancement. In that time, we've got about 3 to 4 weeks to get some weight on the little chum before they're ready to go. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of work to be done at this end as well as the front end of our fish production. So going back to last fall, when we were collecting our brood stock down at the fish fence. The fish fence is generally installed in Kanaka Creek in the beginning of October. If Mother Nature cooperates, it will be removed by mid-December. And generally that timeline is the same, but within that, obviously, migration can be a little different each year and create some challenges. So those approximately 70 days that we have the fence in, pretty much every day we're down monitoring the fence, releasing fish from the trap, stream, and collecting our brood stock. As well, when we have rain events, that can mean many hours are spent cleaning debris off the fence, making sure it's functioning properly, and fish are able to get through into the trap safely. Each fall, within our production plan, several hundred chum will be trucked back to the hatchery, where we do all the egg takes or spawning here. That in itself is a tremendous amount of work and takes a lot of energy, and that's where, again, our volunteers are just absolutely amazing. It gives us an opportunity not only to get them directly involved in the collection of the brood stock and also in our egg takes and their spawning. It gives them an opportunity to communicate with the public and do the public outreach that just happens so easily when the salmon are involved. As you can imagine, the opportunity for people down at the fish fence site to be able to see salmon that close is really something. The size of Kanaka Creek, when we do have a large run returning, sometimes you can see hundreds of fish just standing on the bank next to the trap and the fish fence. So it's always a very busy place. As we make it through the cycle and get our fish out here, all of that outreach then in turn starts happening here at the hatchery. A big part of that is our volunteer base and our volunteers. One of them is Simon Matthews, who's been with us for many years now. Is now a board member with Keeps and a hatchery liaison, but most importantly, has contributed several thousand hours of his time over the years to helping us with fish production here at the hatchery and meeting and greeting people.
So my name's Simon Matthews. I'm a volunteer here at Keeps. I've been here now for about 5 years or so. I actually started out as a stream keeper. I was working on the North Alouette River, which is another river system here in Maple Ridge. And I was working there for a number of years doing salmon survey with the scout group. And I took my stream keepers training back probably about 10 years ago now. But I always wanted to see more of what happened in the hatchery. So one year I happened to be down at the fish fence when Darren showed up with his truck to collect brood stock. And I mentioned to him that I was interested in seeing the other side of how the hatcheries worked. Basically all the way from the collection of brood stock, the spawning of fish, the raising of the fish to the release. And That was probably about, as I said, five years ago or so. And really, I just haven't left since. I'm still working, but as always, I've always had a tradition of volunteering, and I just make time to get out here and volunteer. So I'm out here at this time most weekends, especially at this point in the season. We have, at the peak, we have almost 450,000 fish swimming, so we need to make sure that there's lots of help here, and these guys are always hungry. They're like teenagers. Probably my favorite thing is outreach. I enjoy educating the public. I used to do it with youth and scouts. Now that I've moved on and I'm getting to do the volunteer work I want to be doing, I get to do it with the public who come up to the hatchery or come down to the river, or I just run into people when I'm out walking. Take my dog out for a walk down by the river, and I can help teach people about the fish that they see in the river, because so many of them are new Canadians, and so many of them are people from Maple Ridge who don't know about the salmon that are swimming here. So it's really enjoyable, and I'm looking forward to retirement in a few years, and when I finally get to retire, I think I'll be up here a little bit more.
We're outside now at the earthen ponds that we rear our coho salmon in every year. Behind me, you can see volunteer Simon busy flinging some food around right now. As we're approaching out-migration for these fish, they're starting to get extremely active and feeding as aggressively as they ever have, which, as you can see, as long as you get the food out there, it's no problem feeding these guys. The fish you see dancing around out there, those coho salmon have had their adipose fin removed to mark them as hatchery fish. The front pond, pond number 1, will hold about 15,000. All those fish will get transferred to other watersheds. They'll be going to streams in Burnaby, which include Burn Creek, Stony Creek, and the Brunette River main stem. The other pond on the other side, pond number 2, also holds around 15,000 coho, and those fish will be going directly out to Kanaka Creek. There's several reasons why we mark our fish as hatchery fish and remove that adipose fin, but one reason is they can be identified in the sport fishery and can be legally retained and taken home by people. For Kanaka Creek specifically, that can only happen in the month of November when we're open for retention. Elsewhere, if someone catch our Kanaka fish in the Fraser River or out in the sea, there's going to be different regulations with that, but for Kanaka Creek, you're allowed to take one home a day in the month of November. Most importantly, these fish are also going into watersheds for enhancement, and that's number 1. The streams that I have mentioned are not open to fishing, so when their coho do return to spawn, these fish will at that point return to spawn and continue to reproduce as wild fish. And that is always the goal, that when we do enhance, that enhancement does not have to last forever, and at some point we can get our streams healthy enough and our stocks returning in numbers that are healthy enough, we can either reduce the enhancement along the way or cut it out altogether. Approximately each July, after rearing our coho in the Capilano troughs where you saw our chum earlier, these little guys are around 3 grams in size, which is about that big. They'll be ready to have their adipose fin removed, and we call that fin clipping. And obviously that requires again a lot of people. We clip 30 to 31,000 coho fry every year, and these little guys, after they've had the adipose fin removed and everybody's healthy, about a week or 2 weeks later, they'll be transferred out to the earthen ponds here behind me. Each pond holds around 15,000 coho. They remain in here for a year, and as they're approaching their second spring, which will be a full year in fresh water for them, they'll be preparing for migration. And at that point, something that's taking place with the fish physiologically was something we call smolting. And the par marks are starting to disappear on their bodies. Everybody is feeding ferociously, trying to get as much weight on as possible and preparing for migration to the ocean. So you can also see behind us Simon, one of our volunteers. At this point, instead of feeding the fish, he's taking the opportunity to chat with some of the public that have come for a visit. And as you can imagine, when the fish are getting fed out here or in the troughs, it's quite interesting for people to see that activity, but it also gives us an opportunity, again, for more outreach and every opportunity connecting the public with our salmon and with the watershed. And that in itself is such an enormous part of the SEP program, of what stream keepers do, and specifically here at Bell-Irving, Kanaka Creek Watershed Stewardship Center. It's what our volunteers do on a regular basis. Connecting local residents, citizens in our community with their local stream, and getting a full understanding of not only the life and the salmon perhaps in that stream, but about the entire watershed that they live in. And with the support of our community advisors, never-ending support, which is absolutely incredible, and providing us with just so much inspiration. Pacific Stream Keepers Federation, with the training programs, and again, that support to learn more and more that we can share with residents in our community. As we take part in activities and the general public is walking by, you can be on your local stream doing a garbage cleanup. You could be in your local stream maybe getting some woody debris moved a little bit, so creating some safe passage for spawners in the fall. No matter what that activity might be, generally you'll have citizens walking by and having some interest in what's happening, and there's always an opportunity to interact with them and explain what's happening, explain about all the amazing work that's getting done by volunteers here, and most importantly, the opportunity to connect those citizens to not only that local stream, those amazing salmon that return every year, but again, what they can do personally to provide perhaps benefits for their watershed, or most importantly, preventing negative things from happening like toxins, soaps, different things going down the storm drains from washing our vehicles, whatever it might be, and having an impact on not only our salmon residing in our local streams, but the abundance of life that also exists there. One of the most exciting parts for people is when they actually learn and understand just how much life these fish provide for our ecosystems. And in a big way, what they do is not only provide essentially the hub of that wheel of that ecosystem for survival of so many different species and for the health of that ecosystem, they actually give us the hub, if you will, of education. And that's kind of what we have here at the hatchery, where this little building, producing several hundred thousand fish every year, has tentacles that reach out not only into our community here in Maple Ridge, but far, far beyond. So within our fish production each year, many of those chum salmon are produced to help supplement, in part, the commercial fishery on the Fraser River each year. The coho salmon that are in the ponds behind us have all been marked as hatchery fish. That means they can be retained in the sport fishery. Okay, so now, not only when people come back to Kanaka Creek to fish every year, they fish regularly, not just for coho salmon, but they also fish for trout different times. The local tackle shop benefits from that. The local eateries benefit from that. I would say on average we'll get maybe 300 or 400 different people that will come into the community each year to fish for these coho. And that also brings a lot of money into the community, but again, more opportunities for education. So when you look at the big picture of what these fish provide, it's so far reaching, and what a little facility like Bell-Irving Hatchery here in Maple Ridge can do on an annual basis. We're starting to see not only what would be the next generation, but even the generation after that, where now not only are the kids coming back of the parents that were here in 1984 when they came in high school, now we're starting to see the grandkids coming out and taking part in events and everything else. And what's wonderful is being able to interact with these folks and hearing amazing stories about when they were here as a child, young adult, or at whatever age, and the important experience that they had here, the knowledge they gained from that, and most importantly, what we do every single day, reconnecting people with nature.
Well, good morning. It's Ross Davies here. We're at a place called the Kanaka Creek Watershed Stewardship Center. We're going to show you this facility here, talk about what it's for, what it does, what happens here, and then we'll take a little wander down through the habitat that's on this site as well. So our group Keeps originally started back in 1993. It was officially incorporated, or shall I say 1998, and it started out with Bell-Irving Hatchery. That's all that was here, and we decided to take this message out into the community at large. So we embarked on school programs. It's kind of exploded. In a normal year, we have 5,000 plus in-person participants. This year with COVID, it was a bit different. We had 2,700 YouTube views. We went virtual, and another 2,700 in person, so it was kind of a hybrid. So this facility that you see right here with me was a vision that was probably close to 20 years in the making. It's kind of a home base, a mothership as it were, sort of a portal to nature where students could come inside, use the internet, use resources here to answer the questions that were generated through their explorations out in nature. And those answers lead to more questions, more curiosity. Two buildings here. This is the resource room behind me. This is where the boring stuff happens, the meetings, administration and whatnot. The George Ross Learning Room had no relation. This is a fellow that left a bequest to regional parks, and then sum of about 2.8 million, 300,000 of that was earmarked for this facility, and due to a huge contribution to Metro Vancouver Parks, that put us in for the touchdown. So that hosts things like open houses, prior to COVID that is, meetings, workshops, and education programs as well. We've got a zero impervious footprint on this place. We're taking a look over here. There's roof drains off of each building that come down what we call the Roof to Creek project into a French drain which comes along behind the two buildings, makes a big curve through these rock pits that go down right over there, down the hill, and then off it goes into the habitat we're going to see in a moment. So it's something we wanted to do so we could bring people here and just say that, you know, look, we can design your own houses this way so that you won't have any effect on groundwater with your rain run off the roof. Okay, just looking at the habitat, the Stewardship Center here, and we want people to be outside as much as we can. And with that in mind, the whole Stewardship Center was designed with that in mind. We have an overhang there we can use as a shelter. The amphitheater doubles as a stairway up to the building, which is like an outdoor classroom. So I mentioned about the Roof to Creek project, the drain. Some of the hatchery water drains out through here, this little ditch that goes past us. And noticing today, it's the, what is it, the 18th of April, I believe, we have a whole pile of chum salmon fry that are right below me here in this ditch. And I love this as a teaching tool. These are chums that have either escaped out of the hatchery or they were released to the main stem. They could go anywhere. They choose to be here. So this is a really neat teaching tool. This resembles so many roadside ditches you might find all over Maple Ridge. There's probably 20 or so that are salmon bearing that people wouldn't even have the slightest clue about. So it shows too that this roadside ditch is the type of habitat that most people would look at and not consider salmon habitat. It's got skunk cabbage down there, it's small, but not only is it utilized, it's essential. So I like the fact that these fish are in here. Yeah, so one thing to point out too is a lot of the riparian planting that's gone on with the development of all this habitat here. So we've got a couple visitors coming right now. We've got some black cottonwood here. It's just starting to get going as we're in April. And something I read is that the interior Salish have believed that when you have red flowering currant, which you have right here, the water body next to it will have salmon. And there's your proof. There's teeming with chum salmon fry right below this current. So we've got all these native plants that were put in. There's some willow over there. There's red alder. Some of the salmonberry was already here. Brought the purple flowers that attract the hummingbirds. So it's another thing we can do with our programming is teach not only about salmon, but about the riparian vegetation, native plants, how to care for them, and invasive species as well. We do get the odd invasive plant here, like small balsam, so we maintain these sites and try to keep them clear of that. So we want to turn this into that and make it really nice habitat. This flows down further through another drain, and we'll head down to what we call the big pond. Okay, we're down in the habitat below the stewardship center here, and this is just simply known as the big pond. And what we've tried to accomplish here is we already have Kanaka Creek. That's a fairly large, flashy water course. It can go 0 to 60 in no time flat. It's great for salmon and for the cutthroat trout that live up this far. But for juvenile habitat, it might be a little bit lacking with off-channel habitat. So that's kind of what we've done here. Across the way is what we call Pond 3, which used to be part of the hatchery, but it's been naturalized a lot. And we've documented salmonids in there 12 months of the year. This is one step further down than that. This is a quiet off-channel pond. It would house coho fry in the wintertime, not so much spring, summer. It gets a bit warm here, but you did see the salmon that go through this pond to access the ditch upstream. But this does provide habitat for Pacific chorus frog, for certain species of salamanders. And for education, we can bring our students in here and they do what we call pond dipping, where they get a couple of cups and scoop out through the plants and identify what they're finding. And they can use those insects as indicators of stream health and also to determine whether or not we've got salmon food living in here. So it's a really cool kind of teaching tool. And it started out as just sort of a wet area here with grass. So we decided, let's just take advantage of this and put some habitat in here. Now, the fact that we are seeing these species moving in, I've always been a big fan of the way you assess your habitat is just take a look and see how your target species is responding to it. So the fact these salmon are coming through to live upstream of here, or in here, or the fact that amphibians, reptiles, we've seen common garter snakes here as well, are using this is a real thumbs up. As far as wildlife here, we've got the deer coming through quite a bit. Eagles are a common sight, raccoons, mink, and bears. And it's possible to see a bear anywhere, anytime around here. And what we tell people is just, if we see a bear, to just simply walk the other way and talk to the bear and be calm and let the bear have a turn, because we are sharing this habitat with them. Just to point out, there's a memorial bench right behind us here, and it says dedicated to Bill McLaren. He was a fellow that worked for Parks and Recreation in Maple Ridge. He had a joke for every single meeting, and his wife Babs, Bill passed away, and we decided to put a memorial bench here, and we asked Babs to tell us which is the place she liked the best, and she likes to sit and view this pond and look in that direction. So that's what this bench is doing here. So what we've got here, we're almost down at Kanaka Creek. This is known as the Chum Channel. There's not only this outlet to the big pond right below me, but just over there is a little series of bends and drops, pools and riffles that come out of initially the hatchery. It's a pretty popular spot for releasing fry, and it's good habitat as well. So a little bit of a quicker flow than the pond is, and just really cool place to bring kids during non-COVID times. You can sit on this bridge, look over, look at the fish below you, poke around in the creek. It's all the kind of stuff that we did as kids and took for granted. So we're trying to put our youth in touch with nature. And we want them to take these lessons home. Like, everyone knows where Walmart is. Everybody knows where McDonald's is. Do you know where your nearest stream is? Do you know which stream that storm drain in front of your house is going to impact? Do you know your water address? Mine is Hennepin Creek, 100 meters above the South Alouette. So that's a good exercise for grown-ups as well, is to just tell them that everyone lives in a watershed, that the stewardship doesn't stop when the field trip's over. There's so many different looks to this place. almost by accident one day, I found this little spot right in here. And inside the grove of cedar, alder, Douglas fir, it's almost like a little outdoor classroom. So quite often we'll gather in here and just take in the riparian, the coolness. On a day like today, we're heading for 27 degrees on this 18th of April, go figure. And then beyond it is the day use area, which is also used for programming, to check out Kanaka Creek. We can monitor the water chemistry in the creek, monitoring change over time, some more plant ID, wildlife activity. And further beyond that, of course, is the entrance to the canyon trail, which can take you all the way down to Cliff Falls. That's a sandstone canyon. It's about 10,000 years old, and some really, really cool geology. So I highly recommend it if you visit this site, is to take the walk, 1.3 kilometers each way, some pretty good hills, but you don't have to be Schwarzenegger to do it either. So that's a real must-see. Washrooms in the far end of the parking lot there. Plenty of parking, just a really cool place to go. All right, just winding up our little tour. We're at Kanaka Creek itself. You can see we've got a pretty decent flow. It hasn't rained very much at all in March and April. We're in a mini drought right now. We're seeing some low-level mountain snowmelt, so we've got the creek wetted from bank to bank, which is kind of handy to have. Our salmon will be going from our right to our left, downstream, over Cliff Falls, a water slide for fish, hitting the Fraser by the May long weekend, off to the ocean they go. So a little bit of overview with these education programs that started in 2001, and a real big partnership with not only Fisheries and Oceans, with the funding of the Hatchery facility, but as well as the Salmon in the Classroom program. Even in this sort of COVID-reduced year, we still have 14 aquariums running through School District 42 at 30 eggs per tank. Normally 55, it was dropped down this year because of COVID, but still we were able to do it. Metro Vancouver Regional Parks, we mentioned the contribution to the Stewardship Center. They are huge, working with us with our education programs as well. This year we produced a modified watershed roadshow program in partnership with Metro Vancouver Regional Parks, in particular the resource or the interpreter specialist, where we had the classroom program outside on the school grounds, enabling us to satisfy COVID protocols. So we work a lot with the interpretive staff. It's a fantastic partnership, and we really feed off each other. Let's talk about the City of Maple Ridge, which funds those programs. They've been great over the years. We've been doing day camps here with their programs. And we can talk about the province of British Columbia through the Community Gaming Grant Program, which has been a real shot in the arm as well. So, but the real thanks go to the teachers, the students that make what we do so rewarding. It really is. I think it was actually Zoanne that said to me a long time ago, you know, everyone talks about salmon enhancement. This is really people enhancement, and it sure is, isn't it? So we're actually creating stewards. You know, we see development coming. It would be nice to say, okay, no more houses, no more development, no more roads, but that's not happening. The fact is we do have those things, and since we do, let's get those people in here. Let's turn them into stewards. Let's get eyes and ears on the creeks and make this the most environmentally friendly community anywhere. And that's what we're going to continue to try to do. People are coming, we're going to embrace them, and we're going to make them into stewards.
My name is Alan Jameson. I'm a fish habitat restoration specialist. I spent over 20 years with Fisheries and Oceans Canada, and now am in private consulting with Kerwood Lytle Associates. And we're here today on this day at Kanaka Creek Park and to look at a project I did in the summer of 2019 and to give you all some insight into the factors that went into it, how we approached it, the partners involved, and give you an update on how things have turned out. In 2019, the Kanaka Education Environmental Partners Society requested some assistance from Scott Ducharme, their DFO community advisor. They operate seasonally a fish count broodstock capture fence here, and they had noticed severe erosion happening downstream. It appears that the erosion is probably related to the new 240th Street Bridge that was installed. And at the time that it was installed, the bank was heavily riprap and armored, resulting in water taking a new path down into a relatively steep bank. This is a Metro Vancouver park, and so we engaged Metro Vancouver Park staff to come up with a solution that would be beneficial to fish, but protect the steep eroding bank that provides essential vehicle access to the counting fence. So when I came to the site to help out with the erosion problem, we noticed there was a large silty sand near vertical cliff with the park split rail fence at the top, and it was pretty obvious that another winter or so of erosion was going to result in further recession of the bank, loss of the fence, possibly a hazardous condition. And so it was fairly important to address that erosion quickly. So looking at the site and kind of judging the area, we had a few options. One would be to add a substantial amount of riprap, which would be kind of the typical civil engineering way. That would have required, because the riprap has to be on a relatively gentle slope, either the riprap would have to project into Kanaka Creek or the bank would have to be pushed back, pinching the road space. The other thing is that riprap is not great for providing fish habitat and complexity, and can often result in moving the erosion downstream. So rather than go with plain rock, we went with a combination of various types of woody debris and logs. And the vertical logs are actually driven into the creek bed, and the rest of the wood was then interwoven around them, ballasted with rock, and in some cases there were some pieces of cable used to anchor. So what we have now, after about a year and a half, is a relatively stable bank. It's revegetated. The grass is taken over again, and a very, very nice area of in-stream complexity. And right now there are a lot of juvenile fish underneath it using it. And certainly in the fall, when spawners show up here, they will also tuck in under that area when they're waiting to go through the fence and into the trap. The project went very well due to the partnership between Keeps, Metro Vancouver, and BCIT. And the BCIT connection related to their woodlot, which is in Maple Ridge, which adjoins the Metro Vancouver Park. And they were very good allowing us to source a lot of our wood from their woodlot area. And so we came up with a combination of wood obtained from the woodlot, wood obtained from Metro Vancouver Parks in Langley, and we're able to very, very economically source high quality material, bring it out here, and within 2 days install it with an excavator. And one of the great things was that the method we used didn't require that the split rail fence be taken down. The excavator was actually able to sit on the bank, grab the wood, and push it in with my direction in terms of what was going to go where. So that was a very nice bonus for the method. It also required no fish salvage or isolation, in that very, very low impact, almost no sediment created, and fish were in there within a half an hour of the wood being placed. So we're very pleased with the outcome. And one of the other factors is, by providing the roughness that is there, a lot of the waterborne debris that comes down during floods actually can get captured and continue to supply finer wood material that is generally fairly short-lived. And so every year with floods, there will be a certain amount of wood that gets caught up there, and even fish carcasses, to retain the nutrients and provide high-quality rearing for the juveniles. There are some remnant areas of rock at the toe from previous attempts to fix. And so we positioned the wood and boulders to kind of tie into that area, but went fairly light on the amount of rock that I used. And as I said, it was just mainly large boulders for ballast and shoring up a few areas of near vertical bank. DFO contributed to this project by providing engineering support and design and construction services through the Resource Restoration Unit. And so the Resource Restoration Unit is very important because it provides the in-house services to groups like Keeps through the community advisor, and gives small community organizations the ability to access technical services without a lot of challenge or expense. So when we look at how the wood is working, there's a couple different things going on. First and foremost, from the erosion point of view, the wood in front of the bank that was formerly eroding very much provides energy dissipation, and high velocity water is forced to swirl around and go from sort of a consistent jet that does a lot of erosion to a more turbulent situation, which can cause erosion but isn't necessarily as focused. The back area that is in some of those low velocity pockets that are in the lee of the wood will build up with sediment and small wood debris, and some of those areas will be really important for young of the year or emergent juveniles. They like being in those shallower, more sheltered areas. And then as we move out, one of the other things that the wood structure does is creates a very distinct line between the high velocity water and the turbulent lower velocity water. And that will tend to create an erosion area off the edge of the wood, create some deep water there for some deep water cover. Larger fish and cutthroat would really like that. And then right at the intersection between that deep water scour zone and the more complex wood zone, there's a seam there between the high velocity water and the low velocity water. And that is one of the preferred feeding locations where, like a coho in its spring, when it's a little bit bigger prior to migration, they will tuck in behind the wood, watch the buffet of invertebrates go by, and they can hold their position there behind that wood really easily, but have a high velocity stream of water going by that's carrying all that food. They can go out there, feed, and tuck back in. So very little effort and calories that they have to put out when they're holding there, but they have the advantage of lots of food coming by. So one of the other things that is interesting about this site is that it does contain the evidence of past efforts at erosion control. So as we are looking here, the upstream area, just upstream of the wood that was placed, does have riprap, which is doing its job and was probably just fine dealing with the erosion up until the new bridge and the new alignment. But once conditions change, the solution that was good for one situation doesn't necessarily hold up. And that kind of highlights the need for any time you do in-stream work to continue monitoring it, looking for changing conditions, looking for whether it be upstream infrastructure or development, changing climate, all sorts of things can change. And going in and getting an update on how things are doing, you can often do very small fixes and avoid catastrophic blowouts. So something I tried a little bit experimental on this job, we had larger exposed banks of the silty sand that were at risk of eroding. So I made up some large mats. You can just see one here of 2 to 3 centimeter diameter by about 1 meter to 1.5 meter long branches wired together to make a very rigid mat that's rigid in one direction but can roll in the other direction. So it's like a giant sushi mat. When this was put down, it was staked in and was actually above the ground surface. And what you can see here is that high water events have actually deposited sand and silt in between the stable branches of the mat. So the mat has actually now even started growing grass in this area. So this is a very, very great outcome for what was just an experiment. You can see there's a little bit of erosion in this area here, but not much. And the tie wire that was used to put it together is slowly rusting away and will degrade into nothingness by the time the branches rot. But that's a very, very good outcome. And it's an alternative way of stabilizing the bank that, to my knowledge, has never been done before. Just as extra insurance to make sure that everything was stable in the long term, we did use some cable to interlink the wood and the boulders. And one of the rationale for that was if there was any amount of erosion at the toe that could cause these boulders to slump, we just wanted to make sure that they were not slumping too far and that they were continuing to hang on to some of the wood that was put in here. So down in the lower zone here, you can actually see the sediment deposited in and around the wood because this is a low velocity zone. And so we've gone from one that is actively eroding to one that is actually building up with sediment. And with more fine wood, twigs and sticks, it will continue to recruit more material and become an even more stable bank. So we're at the downstream end, or just past the downstream end of the wood placement that took place in 2019. And this area of bank here definitely needs to be kept under observation. It's relatively stable at the moment. We've got some fairly dense and cohesive sand and silt. This is another spot where one of the branch mats was placed in this area here and has done a very good job. And then in the area where there's no branch mat, we've had about 10 centimeters of erosion. So further branch mats and possibly wood may need to be considered in this area. But overall, it's super fast erosion. It's not threatening any infrastructure, and it's a case of observation required and maybe make a decision if things change, but so far so good.
All right, it's April the 18th. You would never know it. It's 27 degrees. It's like summer. And Ross with you at the 240th Street Fish Fence. And what's going on here? Well, not a lot right now compared to the fall. This is an operation here from about October through till mid-December, the salmon broodstock season. You'll have adult salmon coming inbound from our right to our left. And they'll pass this structure here, and at that time the only way through is a tunnel to a one-way gate that leads into the live box, which is here all the time. It's wide open at both ends now, of course, but at that time, three things can happen with these fish. A portion, about 5%, are taken to the Bell-Irving Hatchery for broodstock, and what that does, it enables us to not have to drag a gill net through spawning grids. There's a lot of candlelight, romance. We're not going to be party to interrupting that. So it's a very non-invasive way to collect broodstock with the hatchery. Second is we can get an estimation of the strength of the run. It's not a count, because this will go underwater half a dozen or more times per year. When that happens, the fish go right over top of us and keep on going. So about 95% will spawn naturally, which is what we'd rather have. There's a third reason too. This whole area has changed so much. The fence was originally came to be in the late 80s, 87 I believe. Back then, about all that happened was broodstock collection. The area has exploded development-wise. There's so many people down here. This has become one of the premier environmental attractions in all of Maple Ridge. We call Return to the Salmon in the fall the Maple Ridge Fall Classic. So in the fall, you've got Grey Cup, you've got Super Bowl later on, and you got Return of the Salmon. So it's so cool for all these people that have moved out here, is they can walk somewhere to see this, to see salmon in their own backyard. They don't have to look on the TV or go to Adams, and I love Adams, don't get me wrong, but they can see it right here in Maple Ridge. So it's a very unique, giant educational program prop for school groups as well, to bring classes down here to see the salmon, to come down in the springtime. I said there's nothing going on. There are chum fry in the hundreds of thousands that are outbound for the ocean as we speak. And we've already talked about the habitat project there. I mean, even today, off season, you've got all these people coming and going from every direction. And we have quite the population of bears. I just had to manage a bear about 20 minutes ago and manage the people, because the bears manage themselves quite well. So if you're down at this site, you come across a bear, it's very simple. Give that bear 100 meters or more and just leave the area. It's the bear's turn. Let them have a turn, not be interrupted. All right, unfortunately, so many times, those of us that work around urban streams, the lower mainland, places like that, sometimes the tagging is not limited to just the fish. You get graffiti on surfaces and things like that. And we had been having that issue here at the 240th fish fence on Kanaka, the wall behind me, routinely being tagged. So we came up with an idea to do a community art mural, to get some graffiti artists down here to make something on this wall that would be used as a teaching tool after we're done. We can use it for our interpretive program. This is a very active site for that. And get the local community involved. School District 42, City of Maple Ridge, Metro Vancouver Regional Parks. They've been awesome driving this thing. Fisheries, First Nations, you name it. So we're in the process now of selecting an artist. And we anticipate getting rolling on here probably, the fall of this year maybe, or spring of next year for sure. Either way, the writing's on the wall.